Hey everyone out there, how's it going? Welcome to Screen Speak. It's the podcast that's all about movies, life, and so much more. My name is Jordan Anderson, and this is my podcast. Appreciate you coming by, and more importantly, I appreciate each of you for supporting the world of movies and having discussions around it. On this episode, I talk in depth about the ongoing WGA strike with my friend and writer Sofia Haan. Sofia is a copywriter by day at a content marketing agency and also does freelance work for a place called Dispatch, which is a print and digital publication that reports on the arts and culture scene of the Minneapolis and St. Paul area, and also does freelance for a place called The Current, which is a non-commercial, member-supported radio station that is a direct affiliate of NPR, known as Minnesota Public Radio, where she mostly writes about bands performing in the area. How badass is that? Sofia herself is no stranger to this podcast. She's been featured as a guest in episodes 42 and 24. So feel free to visit or revisit those if you enjoy Sofia and what she's got to say about movies and life in general. You can also learn more about Sofia and what she's doing by checking out the description of this episode. So over the course of this episode, we're going to break down and analyze and make sense of this WGA strike. And again, it's in depth too. Because a subject like this really isn't one that you can just quote-unquote talk about. Extensive research had to be done on my end to make sense of it all and to justify and inform the opinion that I do have on this situation. And the only way that you're going to find out what that opinion is by listening to this episode. Now, broadly speaking, my goal of this episode is to take apart some of the complexities of this strike and help you to make sense of it. It's also to raise awareness on this issue and why I think it's important and affecting to not just the entertainment industry, but the entertainment culture as we know it. And I think regardless of where you stand on the strike, we can all agree that we want those working professionally in the industry to be able to make a livable and fair wage. So simply put, at the end of the day, we need writers and studios to coexist and continue to put out content that's going to have us talking and connecting in ways that would otherwise not be possible. After the episode, stick around, do all the things, hit the follow button, hit the bell, download episodes, social media, etc., etc. But most importantly, research this strike for yourself and let me know your thoughts on it, either on social media, being Instagram or Facebook, or you can always email the podcast at screenspeakpodcast@gmail.com. All this information is in the description of this and most any episode. So all that said, I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. I hope you enjoy all the content that we have to provide for you on the subject that is the WGA strike. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Sofia, welcome back to Screen Speak. What's up?
Woo! Happy to be here. Honestly, it's excited to be the solo guest. Be the star.
You've only ever been rode co-pilot with Adam.
Exactly.
Yeah, this will be the first with just us.
Exactly. A little nervous, worried that I won't have the good banter, but excited to try it out.
I don't think that's true because you, at your core, are a writer.
That's true.
I mean.
I see a segue.
Yeah. No, but I did want to specifically have you on this because I know that you have a interest as a writer yourself. You do some freelance work on the side. Can I say for who, or is that a big deal?
Sure. I mean, I can talk about it.
Yeah.
So I freelance for two different outlets. One is Dispatch, which is like a magazine. Maybe they call themselves a zine here in Minneapolis that really focuses on arts, culture, different things happening in the city. And then for The Current, which is the major, it's an affiliate of NPR, the Minnesota version. And they do a lot of local independent music coming out of the cities. So,
and you will write about basically like reviews for bands and artists and other things of that nature, right?
Exactly. Yep. For The Current in particular, it is just focused on a review of a show that happened the night before. So far, I've written 2 profiles of local bands, kind of spotlighting what role do they play in the broader Minneapolis local music scene, general economy kind of thing.
Pretty cool stuff to me. You guys were also
Thanks.
very you guys were also very hospitable to me and my wife when we were up there a couple weeks ago, which it's hard to think that like that much time has gone by. It
That was
seems
fast. Yeah.
it went by very fast, but we were up there and we saw M83. Shout out to them. They are incredible. Check out their new album Fantasy in stores now. For those of us that still buy CDs and vinyl and whatnot. And then you also got us a hookup to go see a micro show, which I had never actually even I didn't even know what that was. To see is his name Genesis Awasu?
Owusu.
Awusu. My
So close.
apologies.
No worries. I
Um,
don't think he's gonna
he,
yell at you.
he has a
Maybe he
new
might.
album. He has a new album coming out and a tour I saw. It's a
I
big
know.
tour too. Like there's a lot of locations.
Oh yeah, he's yes. Shout out Genesis Owusu. I think every one of your listeners, as soon as they're done with this podcast, should go listen to Genesis Owusu. Um, Outstanding stage performance. Like he just has so much charisma on stage. Love his music, and I honestly put it down on my calendar when his new album comes out. I'm that excited. So pumped for Genesis.
So side note, aside from talking about the WGA writer strike and everything like that, definitely check out Genesis oh my god. Awa
Owusu.
Owusu. I keep saying
Go
Awasu.
woo!
I don't know. Awoo. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's actually a really easy way to remember it. Genesis Owusu.
loved it.
Yeah, no, he's fantastic. I actually got to meet him at the show. He's
I loved that picture of you too. It was so cute.
it's funny because I actually kind of felt stupid in hindsight smiling for it because I kind of realized that part of like his thing is like don't smile, like don't feel like you got to be pretend for like the media, and then like I'm being a jackass and smiling, but I was happy to have met him and it was cool.
Listen,
So
yeah, you're allowed to express that. And I also love that you were repping M83 as you're meeting him, and you're like, "Hello,
I did.
this is
I did
your
tell
show."
him. I mean, I blatantly was like, I didn't even. I've never heard of you. Like, I'm like not in a bad way. I'm just like, I've never heard of you, but I was in town for another show. I'm wearing the shirt right now. It's pretty cool.
Exactly.
And friends brought us here, and now we're gonna listen to you. And I followed him on Instagram like immediately after meeting him.
Hell
So
yeah.
I mean,
Hell,
that's to me like if that's not kind of the point of doing that, like building your audience and stuff like that, then I'm not really sure what is. But
totally.
we got to get into the writer strike stuff, okay? Because this
Yeah,
is
eyes up.
I'm gonna tell my listeners out here, but this will be a semi-meaty episode just because this is not a subject I found, especially once going in and doing research to just kind of give generalized thoughts on. You really have to get into the weeds a bit and understand how the structure of unions work, how there's multiple unions in the entertainment system, uh, contract negotiations. What does that look like? Why do they negotiate on contracts? There's a lot of these details that are worth kind of getting into. So I didn't want to just go into this blind. So I did a fair amount of research for this. So hopefully that shows in the conversation. But this
Totally.
is how I want this conversation to go, and this is how it's going to play out for everybody that's listening. So I'm going to start off by just kind of generally defining what a strike actually is. I'm sure most of us have a general idea, but I found in researching strikes that there's a fair amount of terminology that I think when you hear about it reported in media, there's just kind of an assumption that you know about it or you understand it. And I think that's a little unfair because not everybody knows exactly what some of these things mean, despite striking being something that's gone on in unions since, I mean, at least the days of like Jimmy Hoffa, if not before then.
The
Um,
30s. Yeah.
I'll definitely talk about as well, just kind of a little bit of the history of like writer strikes, like when did this like last go down? Why does it happen? And then I'll get into the specifics of just what this strike itself actually means. What does it affect? How long could it potentially last? We'll cover what the WGA is as a union, what they sort of do for writers that are a part of it, why so many people are a part of it. We'll get into some more of those unions that are inside of the entertainment industry, and then that's finally when we'll be covering what exactly is this strike about? What exactly are the writers demanding? Why did this strike actually get to this point? Who's kind of on the right side of it? Is there a right side of it? So I want to definitely talk about both sides of it because I feel like the coverage I've seen for it has certainly mostly been from the writer's point of view, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But there's an entire other side of the union issue on this, and I don't really feel like it's being covered that well. So hopefully I do a similar, not a similar, but a good job, just kind of conveying that information. And then ultimately, Miss Sophia and myself, I think we're just going to try to lend our opinions and just, say with a relative amount of confidence, like who is actually correct on this, or is there a side to kind of be on, or what does the future sort of have to hold? So that's what we're going to get into. So with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into what exactly a strike is.
Hell yeah.
Now, Sophia, do you know what a strike is, or what do you think of when you hear the word strike?
See, when I think of the word strike, I think kind of like the big strikes that have happened recently with people, mostly Amazon warehouses,
Right.
New York, Alabama, where it's we are walking off the job. In the case of the writer strike, it's pens down, stepping away from the laptop. You will not
Yep.
get work out of me until my demands are met. And I'm sure
Yes.
that that looks a little bit different for every single workplace. Everyone has like their different demands and their how work is shut down.
hmm
But tell me more.
So striking, I think a lot of us conjure up images of people standing outside of a factory with the classic picket signs and the, big things being like, "You're taking our jobs," and like freedom, and like there's
Yeah.
there's this whole there's this whole song and dance to it. But some of that still is true to this day, and some of that stuff from those old days of striking does still carry over to today. So one of the first terms that usually comes across with striking is picketing, or the picket line, right? Now,
Mhm.
picketing is just the act of protesting outside of a building. So, in the case of the writer's strike, if you look on social media, most of them are happening outside of places like Paramount or Warner Brothers or Lionsgate or a handful of these other big studio systems that, for the majority, are based in California, but there are, of course, other ones on both the East and West Coast, of which WGA has two separate unions to represent both sides of those coasts. So there's that. Then the term I never understood myself is picket line. I would hear people
Yeah.
say like the picket line, and I'm like, well, what exactly is that?
Mhm.
So picket line, what that is, it's a boundary that's established by workers on a strike, typically taking place at the entrance of a work, and others are asked not to cross this. They're asked
Yes.
not to cross this, which is then where the term crossing the picket line comes from. And I
Mhm.
always like never really understood that term either. But what that means is that workers that still continue to work while other workers or other people that represent their company are still on strike. And the subsequent term that follows with that is kind of a derogatory term, if you will. But if you do that, by and large, you're likely considered to be a scab.
Which
Uh,
is such a like
it's a
I don't know.
pretty
That's
dirty
got to cut
term.
deep. If you see them walking in, you're like scab.
hmm
That's just got to cut so deep. That's got to feel so good to say. Oh
The
man.
first time I ever actually heard the term scab in striking and like didn't understand what it meant, it was back in the football movie, The Replacements, actually,
Oh,
because
okay.
that entire movie is about getting replacement players because like the NFL or something is on strike and their players want more money and things like that, and then people are saying scab, scab, and I was like, what? I don't know what that
I
means.
I'm a child. I learned it
Um,
from the Newsies, the '90s movie with Christian Bale about like the little
oh
newspaper boys. They're
yeah.
like the papers. And because all the little like newsy boys, the little like street boys, stop selling
hmm
papers because they're not getting paid, and then they hire scabs, and then Christian Bale's like, "You scabs," and they're like old timey act. I don't know. I don't remember the movie. I watched it in middle school,
You
but
remember it far more than I do. I'm trying to think. I've seen it maybe once, and I don't even think I've seen the entirety of it. But is it worth watching?
yeah. Do you like musicals? That's the biggest thing.
Like
Yeah, you're gonna hate it.
not especially.
Yeah. I mean, Christian Bale does I don't know if it's good, but it is heartrending when he walks through the streets of New York or wherever they are, singing about how he's gonna get out of this stinking town. It's a good one. Really pulls at your
Yeah.
heartstrings, makes you care about the newspaper business.
Did not think I'd be talking about that in this episode, but hey,
Newsies.
hey,
Sorry.
Christian Bale,
Christian Bale.
Newsies. I'm sure that your work is remembered all these years later.
Exactly.
Um, But yeah, the scab term, I was like, okay, like that makes sense though, because like if a lot of people are doing it, you kind of are looking as like a I'm for the man kind of thing. Like screw my coworkers. Like I'm still getting
Hmm.
paid. I can't afford to just stand outside and not get money. So I'm like, okay, that
Exactly.
makes sense. And then the other term that really kind of like was making me scratch my head is I never understood what solidarity meant
Mm-hmm.
in terms of striking. Do you know what that means?
To me, standing in solidarity is just like you see that the way that the workers are either off the job or the way that they have somehow stopped putting in their work to
Right.
XYZ company, and you too are avoiding the services that company provides, or you're trying to stay away. You're doing everything that the writers are also doing
Yeah.
without actually being one of the workers, writers, whatever it may be yourself. Yes?
So that's actually pretty close.
Oh, okay, cool.
I will say from and again, I just want to be very clear to the audience here. I did research on this a fair amount. Does that make me a expert?
Yes.
Probably not. There are
No.
other people well more versed or way more versed in this than me. So if I botch something, well, you can, sorry, sue me. I tried. Solidarity. Okay, well, hang on. So first, what you kind of said is very similar to like boycotting, because boycotting
Mhm.
and solidarity are very similar terms. But what I saw solidarity as meaning is when one union is going on strike to support another union that is on strike. So
Mm.
a good example that I found online of this was like if you take like a grocery store, for instance, and there are a bunch of cashiers that decide to stop working because cashiers are getting grossly underpaid. They have like shit benefits. They're not getting treated properly. It is entirely possible that within that grocery store, you could have a meat department in there being like, hey, we have a lot of our friends that are on the cashier stuff. Yeah, that is bullshit what's happening to them. So we're going to stop working too
And
to
we're gonna
help them kind of get to put
Oh,
pressure on the people and get what they want. And then you're standing in solidarity with your fellow workers that are not doing what you do, but they are in a related field of what you do. That is what I
okay.
understand it to mean.
That makes a lot of sense. So in that case, the general public can't truly stand in solidarity with the workers because they aren't
Yeah.
within the same ecosystem.
It could be another union within the unions because
Gotcha.
that's definitely like honestly like a little bit overwhelming when you look at the amount of unions associated with entertainment. Oh boy.
Huge.
Oh boy. There is a lot. But I definitely think it's important to understand these terms when we talk about striking, especially with this subject, because there is almost like a unique vocabulary that's specific to these particular types of situations. And if you don't understand what some of those terms mean, then you kind of get lost in the conversation and you don't really know how to make sense of it.
Mhm.
So I definitely wanted to establish that.
Yeah, and I feel like it's really easy to see, the flashpoint images, whether that's on TV, newspapers, whatever, and kind of have a general consensus of like, oh, these people are standing over here meeting, these are the people
Right.
striking, these are the people inside. But what role is everyone actually playing in the system?
Yes.
And I do want to point out too, I was listening to a podcast because I also prepped. The picket line is physical. It's not just like
Hmm.
an imaginary line that people are like, oh, by going into work, I've crossed the picket line, air quotes. This
Right.
is very physical. The people who are on strike are outside and they are outside of their jobs. They are
Yeah.
physically there to create that line. I guess, I don't know. I had always assumed, especially for someone like writers, that it is just you won't get any work from us. But
Right.
no, it is a physical representation
Yes.
of these are the people who are not at work right now.
I gotta say, it would be pretty bold just thinking about the actual crossing of it. Because if there
Yeah.
was if there was significant amount of people at your company or organization doing this, and then you're just like, "See you guys," and like just walk past,
Yeah.
like I mean, that's why they have police at these things because it's not illegal to picket. But similar to acts of protesting, there are guidelines and laws that are established by the cities. They don't want people to resort to violence. You're not supposed to carry guns.
Yeah.
There's a handful of other regulations against what a legal picketer can do versus somebody that's just going to get thrown in jail.
Exactly.
So they're generally nonviolent in nature, but yeah, I imagine if I'm going to cross that picket line, I'm probably not going to fare well with my friends at
No, very
work.
much so. Very much. You are so visible.
And something I do want to touch on here just briefly before we continue is what would be the big deal about crossing the picket line? Because I've seen some conversations be like, okay, but like if I'm like a writer and I'm not a part of the WGA, like who gives a shit? Like I'm getting paid. I'm not part of this union. So what is the huge deal with that? The big deal I found with it is that and I'm just kind of speaking generally for people I imagine that want to be taken seriously or be professional as a writer. If you want to quote unquote make it in the industry, most of serious writers that have real accreditation to films, television, talk shows, online creative content, they're almost 9 times out of 10 part of one of these unions because that's how they in turn get proper benefits and pension, and they get fair minimum rates in their contract negotiations. And if you're not in that, it's not to say that you can't get work, but the security and the stability and protection that you're allotted is far, far less than if you had this. So
Hmm.
it's like you don't have to be a part of it, but if you really want to, again, kind of make it in the industry and be on a serious level, then I think you're almost supposed to do it. At least that's how I look at it.
Totally, totally. I definitely agree. And it's also in the entertainment business, so much of what you do is based on networking. And if all of the writers that you want to be working under and all of like the people that you want to be within their studio system see you crossing the picket line, you'll be seen as a bootlicker and that's it.
Yeah.
And like they won't want to work with you because they'll just see you as somebody who doesn't care about the other people who are trying to make it in this industry.
I did see now. How much do you know about the writer strikes in the past? Because this is not the first time this has happened. It's been some time, but it's not the
Yeah.
first.
So I was the one that I was listening to, and I didn't realize that it actually extended so far back
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like a lot of what people have been focusing on has been the writer strike of 2007. Was that right? Or was it
2000, yeah,
six?
2007. No, 2007. So
Okay,
16 years ago.
2007.
Yep.
I feel like the majority of people have been focusing on the writer strike of 2007 because it was the most recent one. Makes sense.
Right.
But I've heard about the ones in the 80s, and I didn't realize that people had been striking as early as the 60s
Yeah.
with it.
Yep.
And honestly, I think there was some earlier too when these guilds and these unions were first getting established back in like the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long history, you know.
The history that I looked at, I mean, I didn't go as far back as like the 30s, though I know that there has been stuff as far back as then. The ones where like they really started getting like mainstream attention to the masses was, I'd say, as early as the 70s.
Hmm.
And generally those strikes, the ones in like the 70s and 80s, happened because, similar to almost why they're happening now, the distribution model of entertainment is usually why. So, like in the
Yep.
70s, there was big strikes over cable and television because that previously was not a way that content was getting dispersed prior to, in like the 60s and 50s and whatnot. And then with 80s, you had the influx of home video in the market. So that was also something where you didn't have WGA minimums on stuff. And so then people want to be fairly compensated for working in a fair distribution model, and there wasn't guidelines for it. So they went on strike. So in that particular case, I'd say it wasn't because like they were, getting treated unfairly. It's just purely because there's not a precedent. There is not a
Exactly.
foundation for this. And so sometimes I found that these writers' strikes, or strikes in general for that matter, happen because there just is not a foundation to go off of for future generations that want to work in the industry. So,
Hmm. Hmm. And
um,
I want can I throw in real quick?
yeah, of course.
The 60s one too happened because of the changing way that TV was distributed as well, because you had reruns all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So you're not being hired to write, we'll say, one season of I Love Lucy. That one season is going and going and going and going and going, and people
Yeah.
are realizing like this one time payment. If it's not like a I see it one time and then it's gone,
Hmm.
that payment doesn't count for anything. You need to pay me for the reruns that you're doing, which I don't know, things. Oh, and then there was also things of like Warner Brothers not really being honest about writing. They would take a script and they would change words around, slap
Hmm.
a new name on it, and send it off. So,
Yeah, and I think they're like actually some of the strike stuff that's happening now. I'm not saying it's the same, but there is concerns about deceptive writing practices is kind of how
mhm,
I would label it as.
that's a
But
good word.
we'll definitely get
We'll get
into
there.
that. Um, But the last time that this really happened was back in 2007. So it's been 16 years officially since that began. And at that time, that one lasted 100 days.
Mhm.
I don't know how long this one's going to last, but I can tell you this, and I'm sure most people kind of get a general sense of this, but I think it's good to spell it out, is just identifying what exactly does this strike mean? Like what does it actually mean to people, not just in the entertainment industry, but of course the audiences at home. Uh, Simply put, if I had to just keep it simple, it just means big stops to all levels of industry production. Like you can't
Mhm.
just think of this as being like movies, but like this can shut down sets. It can also prevent other people that are all part of a working set community to not be able to do their jobs because of, if you don't have writers, you can't, you don't have a script to shoot, you cannot literally go forward and do stuff. So I think it just has big stops and will likely lead to eventual delays, cancellations of content, reworkings of stuff. And then the bigger thing that I think that this means is that there's almost always going to be a change in the financial structure and compensation and benefits towards people that work in not just the writers guild, but this will have larger implications across how the industry is sort of laid out financially speaking. Because
Mhm.
let's be real, most of this stuff boils down to money, right? I
Totally.
mean, let's just be real. I mean,
It's yeah.
like sure, there's probably strikes that happen that have to deal with like discrimination or racism and other bad things like that. But this one, at the end of the day, a lot of it is money based, but not entirely, but a lot of it's money.
Exactly, exactly. And two, with the work stoppages and like what this actually means for the industry currently, it's all the way down. Yes, it is the writers, yes, it is the studios, but it's also the catering companies, it's the
Hmm.
transportation companies. And in places like LA, where so much of your economy is in some way connected to the entertainment industry, it means just really wide ranging impacts to the entire
Oh,
system.
sorry, the you cut out there just a little bit that last
Oh,
part.
sorry. Just saying that the system is so interconnected that when one piece of it breaks off,
Yeah.
the whole system is impacted.
Yes. And something I've been seeing on this, and of course we're all curious about this because I'm recording this right now on May 21st, 2023. The strike is still happening, as far as I know. I'd be great if I like looked at my phone. It's
I was about to be like,
over.
wait.
um, but a lot of people, of course, want to know how long could this last. And I think as you listen on in the conversation, my answer would be a long time because I don't think it's at a good place right now. I definitely got into like the specifics of what the proposals were from the
Okay.
WGA, what the other side was saying. There are some places where they are at like a decent spot at, not like exactly meeting in the middle, but like they're like, okay, like there's some room for wiggle. And then there's just areas where they're just completely way off. And
Totally.
like I don't see I don't see either side budging on certain key issues of the strike. So my guess, honestly, is like this I think could actually be longer than the one in '07.
Okay.
And my
That was
speculate
100
my
days?
well, my speculation for that is because honestly of streaming. Because back then streaming was around, but it was like in its infancy. It was a completely different model. There's so many more avenues for it now. Especially like if you talk about TV, the model of television has drastically changed. You no longer have 20, 25 episode series orders from studios. It's now reduced down to like 6 to maybe 12 episodes. So there's less
Mhm.
guaranteed work on certain things. So the model's different. And then streaming companies also as a whole, not to ramble too much, but they're very shady in that they
Oh,
don't
100%.
share, they will not share like their viewership numbers. It's also tricky financially speaking to figure out how their profit margins kind of work out on stuff by subscriber
Mhm.
bases and things. So, based off all of that, and then just the general state of a recovering entertainment economy from COVID, um, yeah, I don't see this one ending soon. I hope it doesn't go on forever. And then the thing that people are speculating on, and I think it would be unprecedented if it happens, is if other unions go on strike with the WGA, because that would be unheard of, basically. It's
Yeah.
usually like one at a time with these things. If you were to see like the DGA, which is the Directors Guilds of America, or the SAG, or any of these other ones join in, I mean, you would have like a damn near complete halt or massive overhaul on everything. And it would just, it's like hard to fathom it going that far. So I hope it doesn't, but I
Mhm.
don't think this is going to end anytime soon.
No, absolutely not. And I don't remember if it was the Writers Guild or if it was SAG. I don't remember. At one point in the striking history, one of them lasted 5 months.
Yeah.
So it's not unprecedented for these strikes to last a super long time. And, especially if demands are being met, and I don't know the specific logistics of how often they're meeting and trying to negotiate these things
Yeah.
out, and that could contribute to it too. Who's to say?
That's the
But if no one wants
interesting.
to budge, it's just gonna that much
I,
longer.
I didn't actually get that far into the research for how the actual negotiations play out, but I would find that to be interesting, because a place like
Mhm.
the WGA, the place that they are striking against, which for the record is the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, so that's another union. But these unions are big. I mean, like, they're comprised of thousands of people. They have big boards. They have leadership. I don't think it's as simple as just one person sits across from another and they're like, okay, well, we want this, and
Yeah, and
and
they're
we
like,
want this.
"No."
It's like, and let's. I don't even know if these people are meeting in person. For all I know, this could be just like tons of emails going back and forth. They could have
Totally.
Zooms. Especially again with this one, there's multiple segments of the union, again being east and west coast representation. Like, this is tricky. Be very curious to hear how it goes, and I'm sure some of it would probably bore me to tears, because negotiations are not the most riveting thing in the
Yeah,
world.
you bring in lawyers in there, and they're just lawyering,
Lawyering it up.
lawyering it up.
So I gotta make clear too what exactly is the WGA. So I want to give some context into who these people are and have people kind of get a general sense of what it is they do and why people are a part of it. So
Mhm.
WGA is Writers Guild of America. And I very much like to spell out acronyms, because one of my pet peeves, I feel like I complained about this actually the last time I saw you just randomly. I am not a fan of acronyms.
No.
If I work as part of the industry, like if I'm like doing it day in, day out, fine, I might abbreviate it. But
Yeah.
for the most part, yeah, it's really hard to keep track of it all. Just take the extra 2 seconds and spell it out, and I think it goes a long way. But that's just me complaining about acronyms.
Right there with you. I feel like it's a marketing thing too, because the people you're a marketer, know that. They
Yes.
get into meetings and they're like, the RQI and the blah 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 blah. They love their little acronyms and they just throw them out constantly. And it's so easy to just get lost. So
Yeah.
note to all your listeners, it's not dumb to ask someone to spell out an acronym.
Or for that matter, just if you don't know something, it's okay to say you don't know.
Exactly.
We all
No one
need to be told that from time to
Yes.
time.
Yes. No one's gonna be like this idiot over here. They're gonna be like, thank you. I was wondering the same thing.
Hmm.
It's not a weird question.
So, Writers Guild of America, it's a labor union that is comprised of thousands of writers. I think it's as much as like 10 to 12,000, we'll call it, in that
Mhm.
ballpark. And these are writers who all are writing content for your TV shows, movies, of course, documentaries, the news. They write programs for animation, internet media. So some people, even professional YouTube content creators, if they have enough clout and notoriety and they get money, they probably are a part of it too. And as I said before, anybody that's comprised in the WGA that is a writer, they are likely serious about the profession of writing and want to make a livable wage doing it. So that is also why they put themselves in the union, is so that they have some protection and rights. Because
Mhm.
it's a little scary to be just 100% purely freelance and have nobody backing you on these creative projects.
Mhm.
Also, I think it's also important to say what the WG actually does. Like, it's not just like, yeah, we're a bunch of writers and like we hang out, like we have
Woo!
dinner together, like go
Yeah.
writing. WGA has people in there that their purpose is to do negotiations for the studios and on these projects. So they'll administer the contracts that protect the economic rights of its members. So that would mean higher wages, higher benefits, sometimes improving workplace conditions if there have been times where a production company or something has, had really shitty sets that aren't safe and things like that. They will help out with that as well. They also will put in strict contracts for what can go on in a writer's room, things that aren't allowed in there. There's a lot of rules and things that they administer, but it is important stuff that they do. They also will put on programs, they put on events, seminars on issues of interest to writers. So they'll do like basically education for people that are coming up as writers or even people that have been doing it for a while that just need a place to network and get outside of their box. And as I said before, they're representative of both the WJ West and East, being the West and East Coast. So that, in a nutshell, is WGA.
Beautiful. I did have a question for you. I don't know if you found it in your research, but what is the process to get into the WGA? I'm sure you have to prove employment to some regard, if, especially if it's like the news, late night, whatever. But is there like a form, like a Google Doc that they're like, add me, you know?
Yeah, I didn't get as far as to research how you actually join it. I know, of course, they have websites. I should actually link those in the description of this episode. So you
Mhm.
can visit the websites on there. There definitely is like an application that you have to fill out. I think and I might be mistaken, but I feel like it's similar to like if you were requesting membership in the academy. I think you
Mm.
have to get reference from somebody that's currently on the WGA, or again, like if your job is something that merits some of those specific qualifications to be a part of it, then you can join it. But I don't know the actual like step-by-step process of how you
Okay.
get into it. I know a few people that are actually on it, like a
Really?
couple. Yeah,
That's
like
cool.
I know at least two people I could say within certainty. I
Mhm.
think
Nice.
anyway, that are actually in it. But yeah, it's a process, and I think you got to pay I
I'm
think
sure
there's like
there's
an
dues.
annual due or
Yeah.
something like that. Um,
Interesting.
something else though too is like why, what are the benefits of being a part of this? I talked about it just purely from getting fair contract negotiations and health and things, but to be more specific, you get minimums for salary, and studios will put out minimum levels on different types of projects. Some of it has to do just purely based on, is it like a movie? Is it something with like a bunch of episodes? Is it something where they need to have writers on set to be like script supervisors to ensure continuity? Script editors and things like that. So there's various different levels on that, but by being part of the WGA, you're allowed to have guaranteed minimums on specific kinds of work, which is good.
Hmm.
There's also credit protection because there are still to this day plagiarizers and people that will bastardize and take your work. So they are very big on copyright law over there and making sure that if you put your name behind something, you are getting the proper credit for it.
Which is huge.
And then on the back end, and I know you talked about this, you get those residuals, otherwise
Hmm.
known as royalties. And that's something I had to look up too, because people hear that a lot, and it's like, what the hell's a residual, right?
Hmm.
Residual, like I said, it's another word for royalty, but it's essentially a payment that a writer or another person could receive, because royalties are not just to the writers, they go to a handful of different people on the cast and crew. But you get it essentially if a show is successful. And the way
Hmm.
that a studio would deem it being successful is based on the amount of showings it has, the amount of locations it's being put out at. We talked about reruns. So if it's television, even broadcast television still has reruns, and there is still money to be made in that market. So
Hmm.
from that, if there's stuff where there's ads that are going on in your content, you can sometimes get a cut from those. But it's also sort of subjective too to determine what exactly is success as far as residuals go. It's very different, but especially between TV and movies. But
Hmm.
that's what that is. And then you also get healthcare and guaranteed pension for your employment as being a writer on a project,
Hmm.
which is good. So.
Yes. Lots of benefits to being a kind of a protected player is the only word that I can think of, like within that protective bubble.
Yeah, and I think too, like people sometimes need to remember that if you're a writer, it's never like you're lucky if you even get like a year of employment, and that might even be wishful thinking, because some of these things purely feel like gig work, where it's
I
like
was just
like
about to
you
say.
get like 5 weeks of work, and maybe you don't even get allowed to do like rewrites on a show. Like you're just allowed to pencil something up and get it over to the producers, and then you're out of there. Like they might not even keep you around. So that being said, it's like if you put yourself in their shoes, would you really want to be, let's say even living out in LA, and you're going to get married and have like a baby and you're going to get a mortgage, and you have to sleep at night knowing that, okay, well, I got work for another 2 weeks, and then I got a couple other stuff lined up, but then
And I don't know.
don't really
Yeah.
know like what I'm going to do. So I think people need to understand that these people that do this, I mean, like they aren't just writing for one project. They write
Yep.
for several things at a time. I
Hmm.
mean, it's definitely full-time work to do this stuff.
Exactly.
And yeah, you need to have certain protections in order to do that sustainably.
Exactly. And I was listening to, people talking about this, hearing about it, and it's almost like, and it's not to say that these people can't be members of the WGA too, but it almost creates a certain kind of person that can handle
Hmm.
it. You know, your nepo babies, I guess, for lack of a better term, people who are have a safety net underneath them and are protected with enough financial compensation outside of writing that they can focus on writing, and they don't have that kind of undercurrent of fear of like, shit, I got this project now, but the project after the next one,
Yeah.
who's to say? They have that covered. So you're
Yeah.
going to kind of lose, and maybe we're getting ahead of this, but
Hmm.
we're losing some of the people who like don't have the luxury of just committing full time to writing as it stands now.
Well, and I think people need to remember as well that how do these people get these jobs, right? Do you
Yep.
think the writer is always necessarily just sitting around like going through their contacts or emailing people? No. Like that's what
No,
they
of
have.
course
That's what
not.
they have. That's what they have an agent for. That's what they have a publicist for. That's why they also have people on this, because they also secure in jobs. They find the gigs for people.
Hmm.
Because what do we want the best writers to be able to do? We want them to be able to focus on the content, right?
Exactly.
We want them to not be distracted by some of these other things. We want them to do what they are naturally good at in most cases for the ones that do it very well.
Hmm.
You don't get Succession without the writers. Breaking
Exactly.
Bad doesn't happen without it. I mean, again, like you don't get the content without the writers. So I mean, I absolutely understand that front of it. Uh,
Hmm.
so did you know how many other entertainment unions there are, Sophia? I
I
mean, I didn't put together a list of all of them because that
no,
would
because that would be
that would be
it
ridiculous.
would we'd be there for a while. But no, I heard about a few again in the podcast that I was listening to, which I would like to shout out Bingetopia. It is a fantastic, they did a fantastic episode where they talked to a film studies professor from UCLA, gave a fantastic historical context, talked about the nature of creative labor is what she called it. Just wanted to shout that out. Great episode. But where were we going with this?
Well, we're talking about the all the different guilds
Yes,
and unions.
so many. You hinted at it with like directors, but it's, screenwriters, it's screen
Hmm.
actors, it's writers in general. I'm sure there's unions all the way down when it comes to costuming and makeup and
Yep.
everybody like that.
Actually, that's a pretty good summation of it, because it's almost safe to assume that for what specific sector of the film industry that you're in, so if it was costumes, there's likely a union. Same for
Hmm.
like cinematographers or set decorators or editors. There's guilds or unions or groups for all these things, or special interest groups, as some would say.
Hmm.
The ones that are probably the biggest that come to mind for people that pay attention to this stuff, you have the Directors Guild of America, costume designers, Screen Actors Guild, SAG. A lot of people are familiar with that. Then for like the TV side of things, you have the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. That one's actually
Oh,
one of the older ones. So there's a lot of like, old, like the I Love Lucy was probably a part of that.
yep.
You have the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which is who the writers are currently on strike against right now. Producers Guild of America, that's another really big one. And then another one that I actually thought to give shout out to, because I don't think people think about this as well, is the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. Because let's not forget
Yes.
about the people that are on Broadway and the people that do all of that, because that's an entirely other side of entertainment that also, guess what? It requires writers, and it requires
Hmm.
a lot of people to make that happen as well.
There was a whole thing with the Tony Awards. I don't. Again, I don't care about musicals, and so I don't know if the Tony Awards have happened already or if they're coming up. But it was a whole situation that they were like, "Are we going to be able to have
Yeah.
like presentation of the awards because we don't have people to write it?"
Yes. Um, I would say right now, probably not.
It sounded like they came to an agreement where they have like an abridged situation. I don't know what
Mm,
abridged actually means when it in this context,
yes.
but it is happening, just very much not up on that same track as it once was.
Hmm. So, do you know who the WGA is striking against?
You just said it, and I'll be real
It's
honest, I
okay.
forgot already.
It's okay. Uh, just because I said the
Acronyms.
Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, you
Yes.
still have to clarify what exactly that is. That's just a
Yes.
name. I don't know what that means. The
Do
general person does not know what that means.
No, no,
So,
because truthfully, I don't know what a producer does. They slap their name on things is what it feels like, but I don't know what they actually
I
do.
feel like that's a cliche for like the big ones. So like Steven Spielberg, for instance, like he is a quote unquote producer of a lot of things, but he's got enough money and clout that sometimes it is purely just I throw my name and a paycheck onto people to do this, but it's like very
Okay.
little beyond that. There are some more, I'd say, like in independent film especially, that are very scrappy, as I say. So like they do everything from making sure people get fed on set, that people are being on time with set shoots, or shooting on set, making
Yep.
sure that basically we're following schedule and coordination, things like that. They do a lot. But some are just basically here's some money and put my name on it, please.
Yeah, exactly. I heard
um,
that this movie was happening.
so I got to talk about the WGA and who they're striking against. So again, it's the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. Now, what that actually means is these are the people that major studio systems are a part of as a union. So Universal, like Disney, HBO, Paramount,
Warner.
Warner Brothers. I mean, the list kind of goes on, but most any serious studio in there is likely a part of this. And so this is the union that they go to negotiate with the writers, negotiate with other sectors of the unions across the entertainment industry. So that's sort of like the studio's voice and representation in these types of matters. Okay.
Mhm. Okay.
Now, this is why they're striking. Okay. Now, to be clear on this, the WGA and this guild, this union I just mentioned, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, going forward, I'll probably try to say AMPTP because it is a lot to kind of say that
That's a
every
clunky
time.
acronym. All right.
Yeah, but I might, maybe I'll just spell it out because I don't want
Whatever you want to do. You
to,
could be like
yeah,
the producers alliance.
yes, I could say something like
Yeah.
that. So I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this, but every 3 years, the East and West branches of the WGA they will meet with the AMPTP to negotiate a new contract with the major Hollywood studios. So this is actually a regular standing appointment that they have. It is not abnormal for them to renegotiate the contracts every couple of years, being three, four specifics. Okay. So, that being said, in this most recent round, so this would have taken place about 6 weeks or so before the writer's strike officially began, which I want to say that was May 1st. My timeline could be a little bit off, but it's within the last couple
That
of
sounds about
weeks.
right. Yeah.
Um, so they, being the WGA, they made claims that in recent years their compensation has overall been taking a serious hit. With several of the WGA leaders saying that the current system is broken, for lack of a better word, and that writing as a profession is in stake unless these ongoing negotiations are successful. And so that being said, the asks that the WGA has in this round of negotiations is much more steep than these previous rounds that they've done before, which I think is in large part why there's this kind of ground to a halt thing coming, because they're asking for a lot more money than what is typically expected of writers. To be specific, I did pull an actual number on here. If the WGA had their way, like right now, or at least the status of what I read on this was as of May 1st, they would be getting on an annual basis 429 million more dollars per year for writers that are in this guild. Okay.
Whoa. Which is
Now,
huge.
Right. Now, and then I mean that money's again like it's not just into the salary, it's into the contracts, the benefits. Like there's a whole lot that money goes into, and
Mhm,
obviously it would take time to generate all that. But that's what the WGA in a sense is at least asking on the money wise side. Um, so with that being said, it's just a much steeper ask, I think. So
mhm,
that's part of why I think these two unions are basically coming out ahead. But then there's also the weirder sides of this strike that I don't think either side has like a full footing in. I'll just put it to you that way.
mhm.
So, what do you know? So, Sophia, what do you know about the AI issue in this strike? Because
Yeah,
that's one of the weird sides of this.
yeah. See, it feels like in a lot of explanations of this strike, either the AI stuff is only touched on very briefly or it's not even discussed at all
Yeah.
because it is very much like a so like looking back at the different strikes of the past, a lot of the strikes it was a very concrete thing that they were striking against, whether it was reruns, whatever.
Hmm.
It's like I can see how this is happening and how this is directly affecting my work as a writer. When it comes to the AI stuff, it's very much like a this is how I think it might affect us as a writer. I don't know if it's
Yes,
currently in practice at all. It might be.
it
It,
is.
it is. Oh boy.
I
um,
wouldn't say it's like from my research, I would not say that it's widespread in practice, but
mhm.
it is definitely in use in limited capacity right now for sure. But it definitely has the implications which most of the WGA is concerned about, as you said, of like what this could mean.
What it could be. It's not like they can point to, which I'm sure is a huge sticking point when it comes to those
Hmm.
negotiations. They can't point to, oh, my job as, staff writer Z at Jimmy Fallon is directly
Hmm.
being affected by the presence of ChatGPT or whoever.
Right.
So
Which
all that
I
to say, I don't know
actually
a ton about the AI aspect of it all
okay,
because it is so relative.
but you knew what Chat GPT was.
Oh,
I had no idea what that was actually. I
really?
was no, I was actually at a birthday party a couple weeks ago, and we were in the backyard, and people were grilling stuff, and one of them was mentioning that like they were looking for a new job, and they're just like, oh yeah, I'm using Chat GPT right now to make like cover letters, and I was like, what? Like Chat GPT? Like what is
Yeah.
this? And they kind of broke it down to me, at least in the context of like it would help you if you were looking for a job, you could, have this thing kind of write you up cover letters and stuff so that you're not
Mhm,
having to do that. But then I
mhm.
guess you can use it for a lot more applications beyond just that. So, but I guess it's relatively new to me. I mean, what do you know about that?
So, actually, good question. So, for the listeners out there, my day job is working as a copywriter at a content marketing agency, which basically just means I write for magazines, articles,
Hmm.
basically anything that our clients want written, I'm probably writing it. We it's in very limited capacity right now, but we actually had a whole seminar with the content team at our agency to talk about this program called Jasper, which is essentially just an offshoot of ChatGPT. It's the same thing. But Jasper has all of these different programs that you can use where it's, I need an Instagram caption. I need an article written about these things. And it offers you different places to put in, like, I need this ad for a home design company. I need it to be upbeat in tone. I need it to be about 500 words. I need it to have a bullet point section, whatever. And then you can include links in there of this is kind of the general information that we want to include. And it'll spit out a thing for you. So
Hmm.
basically our whole seminar at work was to talk about, like, what does this actually mean in terms of the marketplace of content marketing in particular? How
Hmm.
can we as a company, introduce it in some of our practices? Does it make sense for us to introduce it into some of our practices? How can we take this technology that clearly isn't going away and kind of integrate it a little bit? um, I'm sure that there's a ton of little tiny details when it comes to AI that I haven't I don't fully know. I know that don't fully know, but
Hmm.
have definitely started to see it come up a little bit within my job in particular, and the way that people are trying to harness it a little bit, but not gonna lie, it's scary. Like, as someone who could just go hands off and be like, "All right, this Jasper thing is gonna write this magazine article," it's scary to
Yeah.
be like, "But I'm here. Please
the
pay
whole
me as a person."
the whole conversation around AI specifically in the use of writing is a beast in and of itself. There's so many think pieces out there and video essays and things like that. I found a ton when I was looking at it on the subject. Um, the concern that you outlined to me is interesting of like it being lightly incorporated or
Yeah,
put in a bit or put into practices. And I think it's like, well, how do you make that light? Because it's
exactly.
like kind of like once it gets its foothold in, and if it's one of those things where the people that write the paychecks, they see, okay, well, I'm just looking at this purely as a numbers game. And they're like, if this thing is taking, only 20 minutes to put up something and this person takes 2 hours to do this, well, I'm a numbers person. So all I give a shit about is the 20 minutes. Like they want
100%.
what's less. And I know AI is quite sophisticated. It's only going to get more sophisticated, but and maybe I'll sound foolish on this. I don't know if the system would ever be able to put in nuance or edge or put in a real personality and voice that is not unmistakable from a human.
Exactly.
I don't know if it would ever get there, but even if it did, the people, as you said, that do this, they like doing this. They like they're good at it. You don't like it's like just because something can do it, should it do it
Exactly.
in this case?
Exactly. And the thing is too that we kind of learned as we were going through the software is that it's definitely not a perfect system. And maybe that's just a
Mhm.
result of the technology still being in its infancy, but it's not a perfect system because one, AI is trawling the internet to get the information that it needs to create and produce something for you. It's
Mhm.
plagiarism exists. We looked through and they kind of showed how they did an example one of off of an existing company and everything like that, and there was sentences, some of them word for word, that were pulled from existing materials that they had.
Mm.
If it's all kind of within the company's proprietary system, each company could decide if they want to have that in there, but you still have the problem of this is plagiarism. You're
Yeah.
pulling from somewhere else. And two, it required a heavy hand to edit it, not just for the plagiarism, but because, like you said, it doesn't, you can tell when something is written by an AI and when something is written by a person.
Yeah.
So it like, for the all of the people who are like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna cut corners, reduce our overall costs by
Mhm.
getting rid of these writers to replace them with AI," you're going to have a clunky product. It's not going to be this smooth,
Mhm.
well-written piece by a human being who is able to, like you said, understand those nuances, or in the case of content marketing, understand brand voice. You know,
Mhm.
how are we taking in all these things that we know kind of intrinsically as a person and are able to put on the page? AI at this stage of the game isn't able to do that well.
I think, and it seems like most the writers, excuse me, the writers' opinions on this is that there seems to be some that are at least relatively understanding, if you will, or kind of understanding like a very light usage being like, let's say a writer has a like second draft of a script that they've punched up, but they're just kind of struggling taking it across the finish line. And they
Yeah.
maybe put it through one of these programs and maybe it just helps get their grammar to be more correct, or some of the pacing issues gets a little sorted out from it, and structurally it's just more sound after doing it. Now
Mhm.
you could argue
That's
like, okay,
yeah.
like that's not necessarily a bad thing if you're just kind of using it as like an assist tool and
Yep.
not using it as like the main bread and butter. It's like, okay, like that would save time and headache, and it can be tedious to go through and punctuate something and edit something for copy. But then again, at the same time, when it comes to, let's again go back to the money side of it, the payout, you're
Yep.
going to constantly have people that work on these projects that'll argue the point of being like, well, how much of that was really you, and how much of that is really the AI? And then
Exactly.
it becomes a freaking nightmare to negotiate the contracts on this when you allow the usage of this technology in there in the first place. So
Mhm.
I guess if it was me at the table right now that had a decision in this, I would want to know very full well what the capabilities fully look like on this thing. Is the developer trying to like take it to another place? Are there going to be like new iterations of it? But I think above all myself want to make sure that my employees, in this case, if I'm talking being the boss of a writer, I would want to make sure that they have coverage, that they have say, that they have a voice and skin in the game for it, because otherwise, why have them at all if I'm just going to have AI kind of do everything in the first place? Like, I want to have a community, and I want to have people have good jobs and livelihoods. I don't want to take jobs
Mhm.
away from people, and writing is something that is so intrinsically creative. Um, I don't like the idea. It just leaves a bad taste in my mouth, leaving the idea of that um to a freaking computer. I mean, what is this like? Like I don't want Skynet taking over. Like screw
Yeah.
that.
Exactly. There was a quote that came up in the podcast that I referenced earlier where, and I don't remember his name, but some writer in relation to what a previous strike was like, it can't be that damn hard, to be a writer. You should put one word in front of the other. And someone,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And then someone was like, no, it's a matter of putting the right word in front of another, so which again, my opinion, only a human can do that, can
Yeah.
understand like this is the next step, this is the next thing, this is how I can create something that is evocative and something that is
Yeah.
meaningful and resonates with people. And it's just so hard to say with AI because it is so relative. And
Hmm.
we don't have those boundaries of this is the full capabilities because it's still growing and it's still going to change. And even if you
Yeah.
put up those boundaries with the WGA, that technology can still grow and evolve. And it's just kind of scary to think about like how little we know and what to do with that.
I just think right now, I mean, and I'm definitely going to be talking about this with I'll definitely be talking about this with you, which is the specific asks that both sides have. I'm
Hmm.
on the writer's side on this one.
Yeah.
I can definitely put my opinion on that. I totally get where their concern is for this. I think the asks that they are asking for that are pretty reasonable,
Yeah.
and that the other place, the producers for the studios, they're kind of being terrible. It
Oh,
seems like for me.
100%.
Like I'll just yeah, I'll be direct on that. They're it's kind of crazy to me that they're not even being open to the table to talk about this, but.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on from the AI and the scariness of that, which this podcast, by the way, I'm not going to use AI to produce that.
We've
uh,
both been AI this whole time.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
not
Well, I
even
was going to say
real.
this. Isn't this convincing? You couldn't even tell. This is completely generated. It's like I think of like James Earl Jones because they used AI for his voice in the
Oh,
Obi-Wan series. Mean,
interesting.
I mean,
Is
Darth
he
Vader's getting old.
dead?
He's no, no. James Earl Jones is still alive. He
Oh,
is.
okay.
Let
That's
me
good.
actually. Well, let me see now. Just squirrel moment for a second. James. I hope he's not. I don't think he's gone.
I didn't
God, I'm gonna
I
be
didn't
terrible. No, no, he's still around. He's 92
Woo!
though. Still
Let's
92.
go.
But that's an interesting point because you could watch that. I mean, it's pretty convincing. Like you could have fooled me that that was not really James Earl Jones,
Yeah.
but
I mean, they've done it visually. Like you had, what's it, The Irishman? They had The Irishman and Robert De
yeah.
Niro's horrific age like regression. They've
I
done it for Michael, what's his face? He's got the long white hair,
long white
short,
hair.
Wolf of Wall Street, Beautiful Wife,
Why am I
Fatal
drawing a?
Attract. He was in Fatal Attraction.
Oh, Joshua Jackson, like that guy?
No,
Oh, Michael
the
Douglas? Michael
Michael
Douglas?
Douglas. Michael
Oh, for like
Douglas.
the Ant-Man movies, right?
Yeah, they've definitely,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah,
all that
yeah.
to say, a lot of like visual age regression with, I'm sure, AI, but
Well, the new Indiana Jones is going to have the digital de-age, and it sounds like actually because it had the screening over in Cannes, the film fest is going on right now.
yeah.
I that's a bucket list thing. I desperately wish, like, I know I'd
Go to
probably like,
Toronto.
I would probably groan a little bit at the pretentiousness of Cannes. Like, I mean, not to spit on its history or its people. I mean, like, there's some great
But I will.
talented artists, but I mean, I'm sure I'd go there and like listen to the French presenter speak and just be like, "This is the golden bomb," da, 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 da. And I just be
The bump.
like, "Okay." Well, and then okay. I'm turning this into a little bit of a tirade
I love
on the
this.
film fest thing.
Do it,
Uh,
do it, do it.
what is with the frickin' like when they're just like it's an 11-minute standing ovation? Like,
Thank you. Thank you. I'm
oh my
sorry.
god,
If I was one of the actors and someone claps for me for
I'd get
20 minutes,
uncomfortable after a
kill
while.
me. kill me. Take the award and just bah, because that would be so terrible. Also,
Yeah.
what are you proving? That it's that good? That just seems like, especially now when people like keep reporting on the fact that
Yeah.
the applauses were so long. Now it's like a game to them
Yeah,
where they're
it's
like,
like a competition.
ooh.
It's like they got a 7-minute one and not a 5-minute one. Oh my
I
god.
gotta get an 11. And it's just like, this is so ridiculous. Oh my God. I can't believe we're like
uh,
making this part the competition too. You guys are
yeah.
embarrassing.
I mean, I fully like respect that they are doing the standing ovations and that they are
Totally.
maybe clapping longer than the average one because it's so industry and art specific crowd. I get that, but I mean, I heard one. I think actually, let me look this up quick, and then I swear to God, we're going to continue because the only reason I even brought this up is to say that Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford,
Yep.
a report came from Cannes saying that there's a significant prologue sequence in the movie that I think it's like 40 minutes of him being de-aged. So
Good
it's like
Lord.
a fair amount of the runtime of dots on Harrison Ford's face,
Yeah.
making him look like he's 30 years younger. But
Maybe
hang
they should
on,
have taken that as a sign that
I'm
they
gonna look
didn't
this
need
up.
another goddamn Indiana Jones movie.
Longest standing ovation cans. Oh,
I don't want to know. Do I want to know? Oh my
sorry.
God, tell me.
Yeah, take a
Tell
guess.
me.
Take a guess.
An hour.
No, no,
Oh, that would be
no.
crazy. I had to shoot for the moon.
I mean that would be bonkers.
Oh, was it? I
You
feel
get
like it
one
has to
more.
be at least half an hour.
No, okay, actually no, no,
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
no.
I'm
So it's
sorry.
not, it's not, it's not that bad. I mean, I don't know. I'm saying it's not that bad. So apparently, it was for Pan's Labyrinth, the Guillermo del Toro
Oh.
movie, and it
Oh,
was it
okay.
was 22 minutes of nonstop clapping for
Jesus.
22 minutes.
Guillermo del Toro is old and they make you stand the whole time. So he was just standing there. Let the man sit down. They need it to be like baseball, where it's like new now with baseball, where it's like you got the pitch clock, applause clock, play
Here's what
stop, stop.
the last thing I'll say on this before getting back into the conversation is, look, I haven't been there. For all I know, maybe I go there, I would be so
And he's
moved
like,
to see like the nonstop clapping, and like I would leave it and be like, "Oh, I get it."
yeah,
But I'm not there, probably won't be there, and I just see clapping for 20 minutes, and I'm like, I just like I just don't get it.
yeah,
I just don't get it. But
yeah.
and in any case, let's
In any
continue.
case, in any case, you should go to Toronto or Park City at some point.
I
Manifesting
I
that for
would I
you.
would love to. I'm actually looking at just more local film studio or not film studios, film festivals to go to with my podcast because I did it for the Cedar Rapids Film Festival. Iowa has a few other film festivals happening this fall, so fingers crossed that
Fingers
I can
crossed.
kind of do some somewhat of a, I guess you could call like a podcast PR move sort
That's
of, because
awesome.
like, well, because I liked what I did before at it, where I talked with the artists there. I like promoting their stuff and learning about them, but at the same time, I'm putting myself out there too and building the brand. So the hell with it. I'd be lying if I'm like, there's not a shameless marketing plug for myself. Like,
Yeah.
come on, I
Sorry. Sue
I'm
me.
working at this.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Anyway.
I wanna get back to moving past AI. We talked about the obnoxious clapping.
Yep.
Fun moment there.
It was good. A good
Uh,
detour.
but the streaming issue, we
Yes.
got to talk about this briefly as well, because going back to when we were talking about how striking sometimes happens because of the distribution model changing and writers wanting to make sure they're fairly compensated. Talk about in the 70s, it was over cable, 80s home video. I'm sure DVDs at one point played into an effect as well.
Yeah, I'm
I
sure.
don't really know. Um, but the streaming issue is interesting because the WGA's point of view, it sort of seems like right now is kind of 2 points I boiled it down to. Is one is that the work that's done on these programs is not as near secure as traditional network television jobs are because the duration's far less. And they
Mhm.
also pay a lot worse because in large part due to, I'd say, like the big influx of content that now is living there, and there are
Yep.
so many competing platforms out there that it kind of devalues, unfortunately, the work of writers on there because it is so easy now to produce content and just kind of throw it out into the wind and see what it goes. But then the bigger question, and even one I still don't fully know, but I'd love to hear your opinion, is the shady numbers on it. Because the streaming
Yeah,
platforms like Amazon Prime and Netflix, good luck figuring out how many people actually watch the
they
stuff,
won't share.
how much money they get from it. So when you play on the residual side, which is one of the ways writers also make a lot of payout on their projects, well, how do you really compensate fairly on that if you don't really know for a fact how well your program's actually playing? So I guess my question to you, why hide these numbers from of course, the people, the writers, of course, maybe just to hide money from them. I guess it's a selfish studio move. But then why like the masses as a whole? Because like,
Yeah.
and I'll shut up here in a second, but like, it's kind of like with the traditional box office for a theater. Most anybody knows that like when any movie comes out into the theater and you look opening weekend, you can see right then and there, this is how much it made domestic, this is how much it made globally. Boom.
Yep.
The numbers are
Yep.
right there, black and white. Why can that not similarly be done for streamers? And I'm
I don't
sure it's
know.
complicated.
Yeah. In my head, okay. So for context, I love The Bachelor. I love The Bachelor. I'm obsessed with it. And there's a podcast that I listen to that has drugged me further into this like pit of obsession about it. And they talk a lot about how um, broadcast TV is dying. Like people aren't watching traditional broadcasted shows; they are going to streaming platforms. And they talk about how like The Bachelor is swept up in that. Numbers have been plummeting for years and years and years for shows like The Bachelor. But obviously, those numbers don't account for things like Hulu watches, YouTube TV watches, everything like that. So in my head, it makes me think that we use Hulu in this example for The Bachelor. Hulu doesn't want to share the fact that like maybe you have a ton of people who are watching The Bachelor the next day. They don't want to share that because in a way it's like you almost want those network TVs to kind of go by the wayside so that people then continue to migrate to the Hulu, the Netflix, the Paramount Pluses. You don't sure you might need them for the content that those studios produces, but if they plummet far enough, those studios can buy those shows off of them, produce them in-house within the streaming platform, and continue to create more money because they know that they have the viewers. They know that they continue to have a profitable show. They just don't want the networks to know that. Maybe there's more behind the curtain a little bit and they just aren't sharing it with people, but in my head it's purely a numbers game. And they
Hmm.
want to have their proprietary models and scales and everything like that, and they
Yeah.
want to get rid of the other competitors that are in their field, in this case
I didn't
broadcast.
actually even think about it from like that kind of cutthroat mentality of just, if we're kind of strategic about the numbers we share and don't share, we can sort of project uh confidence like in something that maybe doesn't even have it there, and you can kind of like it's very shady, very
It
like
does
Wall
give them
Streety,
those,
like like you're kind of
like a
pumping up
cushion.
stock as they say.
Yeah, it
Um
it does, and
yeah.
who's to say, maybe that's kind of a cynical approach to it, but these companies
But
haven't
there's
proven
absolutely
otherwise.
well, and this is something that I don't think a lot of people talk about in the context of entertainment on this. Hang on, I'm making sure that the timer. I don't think this will just
I
stop
don't think it
recording.
I no, I
No,
don't think it's like Zoom.
if there's an interruption, I'll figure it out. But
Nice.
um, I don't know. I am such a I kind of am like the more the merrier with content creators and people in art. Like I talk about this actually like with my own podcast and getting it to be successful and have other podcasts or artists get successful simultaneously. So for instance, I don't see any harm whatsoever if I was like on an episode and I just started rattling off like 10 different things that I really like. And I just told people, like, hey, go on this, check it out. Or even going on somebody's show or something like that and giving them some love. And then they in turn to me reciprocate and do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
That's kind of more my mindset as an artist because I guess I just called myself an artist, but I think to an extent
love
I
that.
am, and in an extent. Um, but I want other artists to thrive. And I guess me myself, I'm just trying to get at, I don't have like the cutthroat business mentality where it's like, well, we're struggling for ratings right now. Who's getting our ratings right now? Well, it's this thing. Well, what can we do to end them? Like
Exactly.
and the thing is though, is that I'm sure these people are out there. And I don't want to
Totally.
be like naive and act like they're not there, and also not be naive and act like we don't need them sometimes too.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
need people that are aggressive sometimes and will push to be above a crowd, because then otherwise, if everybody's truly on the same playing field for things, then, things will not stand out from each other. And then, what am I trying to say? It's like you want the best to make it to the top. I mean, like that's what you want. And if everybody's a little too nice and kind of like playing around, then I don't know if that happens. So
It's just so
yeah,
fundamentally couched in capitalism at the end of the day, of just
money.
how can it, yeah, exactly. Money is driving this. How can my business do it? And I don't know. I think the fact that that's not your first thought of, these companies are
No,
trying to desecrate these other companies is just because you're a good person and aren't
yeah,
being like, I'm gonna ruin every other podcast that's ever existed. Watch your back,
no.
you know?
Yeah, no, I just like, because to me also there's a strength in numbers. It's kind of like why
Mhm.
people join a union or a guild.
Yeah.
I mean, because like for me, I feel like I'm much more effective as a content creator and an artist if I am helping to go out of my way to build up other people. They in turn want to build me. I learn more by being around their worlds as well. So then that only influences me to make better content myself. So I
Hmm.
don't see any real downside in it. The only time I would is, again, yeah, truly from the money side, because if I had to maybe differentiate my content a little bit, like, or like how I make money. So maybe I'm better at doing ad reads, or I'm better at the merchandise and my logistics system, or like behind the business model. Like my business model is better than some other content creators or artists, then that's fine. Like I
Yeah,
still feel like I can do that without screwing somebody else over, but
exactly. Exactly.
I
Because
I don't know.
yeah, I think the creativity aspect is important of like, yeah, how can you differentiate yourself and how can you be on the cutting edge and bring innovation to this industry? Because yeah, there are other, you know, other movie podcasts. There's a lot of them. But in my
But
head,
wait, there's other people that are doing something like this?
I don't
It's
it's
not just me?
shocking to report. Shocking to report.
Oh my god.
No. But in my head, a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's just like
Yeah.
it it's ugly to be like, just kidding, I'm gonna sink that boat. So who's to say?
Hang on, quick interruption, Cook. Ezel is here.
I got
I'm
Hazel.
here. I came out
Hello.
from.
Okay.
Hell yeah.
All right.
Love Isola.
Yes, no, Isola is good. I do feel bad though. Her energy was like really bad like yesterday afternoon, and then I took her temperature and it wasn't like it wasn't 98, but it was like 99.7. So like
Ooh,
it was on like
teetering
the
a
warm,
little.
yeah, it was teetering on the warm side. So like I got her like a cold washcloth for like her head, and like try to just
Hmm.
help her be comfortable, but it's I having a
Oh,
fever blows. So
no, you're just never
she's fine.
comfortable. Oh, poor girl.
Uh, okay, so let's circle back to this. I got some edits I got to make, but that's fine.
And that's life.
Okay, circling back to streaming. So we basically said that, shady numbers,
Yeah.
they could have the numbers be shady because certain studio distributors basically want to have better profits for themselves,
Hmm.
pay writers less and stuff because they're like, wow, whatever. They don't have to know how successful it is. More money for us. Cha-ching.
Exactly. Or they can just
That's a
present,
simple way of
yeah,
putting
they
it.
can just present the image that they are like on top and they're doing so well because nobody knows.
Yes.
Who's to
Now,
say?
speaking of what we do know, though, this is a smooth segue.
Whoa. I'm gonna
What
slide right over.
what we do know, at least as of May 1st, is what the writers want. We do know
Yeah.
that
Okay.
because it's actually published. I don't know if you know this. Like it is
Oh, I didn't
public.
know that.
Yeah, they put it out there. It's a public doc. I'm actually going to share my screen with you so that you can
Oh,
actually see it, because I thought I would kind of run down it, and then as I go down each one of these, which is not, for the record, this is not like a 20-page document. This is not that painful.
they got their bullet points.
Um, but I'm gonna go through each of these on here because I want to be specific to the people listening, like what exactly the writers are wanting. We
Hmm.
need to know that, and also figure out at least our interpretation of how close the unions are on this versus, oh hell no, we're not even anywhere close. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, in my just personal opinion, there's like a good 70% of hell no on this. Of like, we're not even
Nice.
close to it, and only like the rest of that being like we're kind of close. But let me get this shared here. Actually, let me throw this over here. Okay. Can you can you see this?
Yes. Oh, this is very nicely laid out with between the
Yes.
two. Like this is what the okay
Yes. So,
AMPTP wants versus the
yep.
WGA. Oh, this is
Yep.
very nice.
So give me 2 seconds here because I'm going to throw this over here quick just because I have some notes to kind of go along with this. But um, let me go through this document with you, and I'm not going to read this like verbatim, but I'm just going to kind of give you the general gist of it. So
Hmm.
what I'm looking at, everybody listening, I'm looking at the WGA negotiation status as of May 1st, 2023, and there's two columns that basically show what the WGA is proposing, and then there's also the AMPTP's offers or counter offers to what the WGA is proposing. Okay. Now, something to be clear about this document, at least this is for me, it doesn't say this, but I'm interpreting it this way. This is published by the WGA. So that means it could be within reason to assume that the stuff on the AMTP that's written by WGA people, I would assume. So
Okay,
meaning
that makes
that I
sense.
still feel like there's details that we probably won't know about when it says like rejected their proposals, refused to make a counter, or some of this language in here. I really don't know within 100% certainty how much is that being directly pulled from what the AMPTP is saying versus how much the WGA just threw this together. Not trying to be distrustful of the WGA, but it's like, look, they are humans, they have a point of
Yeah.
view. I could see this.
It's
So,
important. It's important to understand context. And I was going to ask about that. If everything that's on the AMPTP side is
yeah.
based on, previously what had been in place or what had been
Yes.
come up from the last time that they negotiated.
Right.